Good morning, everyone. Paul Ruppel here with Fox 29 News Now. Hope your Thursday is off to a great start. Let's get you a live look at, this will be radar. You're looking at ultimate Doppler right now. A few scattered storms are in the forecast today. We'll get you a full look at weather in a few moments. In the meantime, let's get you caught up on the massive police response after 6 officers were shot in the city yesterday. We have new home surveillance video that shows the moment shots were fired. Let's watch that. Good morning, everyone. Paul Ruppel here with Fox 29 News Now. This is footage from this morning that was provided to us, home surveillance video that shows a chaotic scene during a North Philadelphia police shootout. It's the moment shots first rang out in the shooting that wounded 6 officers in North Philadelphia, and it was all caught on home surveillance video. A video shared with Fox 29 by neighbor Eric Garrity shows the chaotic scene as a narcotics officer's strike force went into a home on the 3700 block of North 15th Street. Once several officers go inside, gunfire breaks out and the officers scramble out of the home while nearby officers find cover. One officer can be seen crawling out the front door of the home before he is assisted by a fellow officer. Residents in neighboring homes and walking the streets can also be seen taking cover. Neighbors told our Fox 29 Sabina Korea Coast that sharpshooters with the police department had entered their home during the incident in order to train guns on the home where the suspect had been firing from. Later in this video here, you can see 2 officers helping that 3rd officer who appears to have been struck by gunfire. I believe we had that at the top there. A total of 6 officers were struck by gunfire during the incident. All were released from the hospital late Wednesday night. 1 officer who was hurt in a crash remains in the hospital. Here again is some footage of those officers being released from the hospital. Thankfully, all were in stable condition and released. The 1 officer, again, who was hurt in a crash while responding to the scene does remain hospitalized. You can see officers saluting as the wounded officers being released from the hospital were allowed to leave and return to their homes to rest and recover. I believe that is FOP President John McNesby there holding the door open for one of the officers. Again, the recap, Maurice Hill is the suspect. He's 34 years old. He surrendered to police right around midnight last night, early Thursday morning, and was taken to Temple University Hospital, where he was treated and released from the hospital, but remains in police custody. Police say Hill began firing at officers who were serving a narcotics warrant around 4:30 p.m. Wednesday at a home on the 3700 block of North 15th Street. Again, that shooting continued sporadically throughout the night, afternoon, and evening, wounding a total of 6 officers. All of those officers, all 6 of the ones who were struck by gunfire have since been released from the hospital. Fox 29 has learned that Hill has an extensive criminal history, including at least a dozen arrests since he turned 18. He's been in and out of the hospital since 2002 after being convicted on charges including illegal possession of guns and aggravated assault. Philadelphia Police Commissioner Richard Ross, during a news conference this morning, said, "I'm surprised he came out because he was indicating to some that he wasn't going to do that and that he was not going back. Many of you found out about his history. It's very significant. In fact, he told me on the phone, he used the word extensive. He had an extensive criminal history and that he knew the system. This is why he was making the outlandish demands he was making." Those again were the words of Commissioner Ross in an update news conference on Thursday morning. Most recently, Hill was convicted of perjury in 2013 and was sentenced to 7 months probation. Records also show dozens of serious charges over the years that were withdrawn in court. Hill's attorney this morning, Shaka Johnson, told us on Good Day Philadelphia, he's a local attorney and frequent guest on Good Day, that he has represented Hill for the past 5 years and tells Fox 29 he expects to represent him in this case as well. Johnson helped with negotiations during the standoff before he was called to the scene to speak with Hill through a megaphone. Again, that's a bit out of the ordinary to have both the city police commissioner and an attorney for the suspect to assist in those negotiations to get him outside the house. But that is what happened. Police have not yet announced formal charges against Hill in Wednesday's shooting. Show you that ring footage again here. Our Kelly Rule says that Hill was released from Temple Hospital this morning and taken to police headquarters. She has a photo of him on her Twitter feed. Online records again reveal an extensive criminal history, including those approximately 12 arrests, time in and out of prison, numerous charges withdrawn in court. We'll obviously be digging into that and get you the latest information on tonight's Fox 29 News at 5, 6, 10, and 11. Again, a harrowing day for the Philadelphia Police Department. Fortunately, it was not worse than it was. 6 officers wounded, but all expected to recover. 1 injured in a crash, still hospitalized, but we're wishing the officer a complete recovery. Amazing footage of yesterday's shootout in the city. We'll try to get you some more on this shooting after we take a full look at your weather forecast. You're looking live outside our studios at 4th and Market Streets. Currently it is 77 degrees, dew point 68. Winds out of the east at 6 miles per hour. You're looking live. I believe this is a shot of Wilmington, Delaware. And here is a look at the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. Do you see some gray skies on the horizon? We do expect some scattered showers throughout the day, so we'll get you some more information about that. Our Scott Williams is calling them a few hit or miss showers this afternoon. The best chances will be north and west of the city. So watch out for that AM fog. It's probably burned off by now in a lot of areas. There was a dense fog advisory until 8 a.m. So probably burned off at this point, not much lingering, but then the threat becomes for a hit or miss shower later in the day. And it will be warm with highs in the low to mid 80s. Here's a look at your current temperatures around the region. 77 in Philadelphia, 70s almost everywhere on the board except Mount Pocono, where it's a little cooler at 64. In the Northeast, 70s for much of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, Boston and Burlington being the exceptions at 68 each. And across the U.S., again, 88 down in Miami, 84 in Tampa, 85 in New Orleans, and 83 in Houston, so already in the 80s along the Gulf Coast. 80s in Vegas and Phoenix, 60s out on the West Coast, and generally 70s in the Midwest. Feels pretty similar to where we were yesterday at this time. It's about 4 degrees warmer in Philadelphia at this hour, but 6 degrees cooler in Cape May, 4 degrees cooler in Dover, 5 degrees cooler in Allentown. Winds are pretty light right now, just 7 miles an hour in Philadelphia. Single digits most places, except Millville, New Jersey, where it's currently 10 miles per hour. Not much to speak of in the way of gusts, but mainly the winds coming out of the north and east. Here's your visibilities. As we mentioned, there is some fog in the area. We did have a dense fog advisory until 8 a.m., so some places still seeing visibilities as low as 2 miles per hour, like out in Reading. Your look at satellite, some cloud cover, as we mentioned, some dark clouds. Here's your future cast. You can see those scattered showers popping up over our area. Some over Pennsylvania, even as late as overnight and into the morning tomorrow. And here is your 7-day forecast from the Fox 29 Weather Authority. Thursday, a few showers, 84. Friday, a pop-up storm, 86. Saturday, isolated storm, 88. Sunday, an isolated storm, 91. Monday, hot and humid, 92. Tuesday, a heat wave. If we ring up those 3 90s in a row, I believe this will be at least our 5th heat wave of the season. 92. And Wednesday, it stays toasty at 90 degrees. Not great sleeping weather. It looks like it's going to be in the mid 70s for most of the stretch. Although we are calling today a 7-hour forecast by numbers, Friday an 8 and Saturday a 9. So climbing the ladder a little bit there before the isolated storms move in. Of course, you can get your forecast anytime by downloading our Fox 29 weather app. It's available in the Google Play and Apple iTunes stores. Get the hourly forecast, see recent radar images and a future cast of where the showers could pop up. Again, you're looking at the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. Let's get you live looks at each of our weather metrics cameras here. We'll take you around the region so you can get a look at those cloudy conditions and maybe where the fog is still dense right now. Obviously, that was a shot, was labeled Allentown. At first, you saw the Benjamin Franklin Parkway again, but then you saw Allentown, and now you're in Cape May, New Jersey. Lots of crowds out enjoying the weather in Ocean City, New Jersey today. You got your bicycles, you got your Surreys, you got your beach goers. Mid-August, and plenty of folks out on vacation right now. In Reading, you see the train stopped on the tracks there. Again, visibility poor in Reading right now, as we told you during the weather forecast, the weather conditions. So watch where you're going. Visibility of about, I think, 3 miles is what it said for Reading. And as we come back to Philadelphia, we'll finish the loop here. We'll go to Rehoboth, get you some looks at Wildwood and Wilmington as well. And we'll get you an update on the gun control debate. All right, let's take it back live here. You're looking again outside our studios at 4th and Market Streets in Philadelphia. Again, that violent standoff in Philadelphia left 6 police officers wounded and reignited a debate over gun control. Efforts are percolating in Congress to expand background checks and so-called red flag laws.
Gun control advocates have succeeded in one sense. Everyone around here seems to be talking about gun control, even if there's little agreement on what to do. A violent day and night in Philadelphia, finally resolved early this morning. An alleged gunman is now in custody, and 6 wounded police officers are recovering after a 7-hour standoff. And in the midst of it all, some 2020 candidates were talking gun control. Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeting, "We don't have to live like this. We must pass gun reform laws to end the gun violence epidemic now."
We must pass gun violence prevention legislation.
Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has been pushing for an expansion of background checks for gun buyers, something that has already passed the House. And President Trump says he's open. Many Republicans, though, point to existing laws.
We have laws today that aren't enforced. The number of people who try to buy a weapon who are not legally have the right to do it, less than 8% of those are even prosecuted today.
A new Fox News poll shows majority support for background checks, removing guns from at-risk owners, and even banning assault-style weapons. But when you ask people which factors are most to blame for gun violence, ranging from easy access to guns to video games, there is little agreement.
Democrats say the problem behind the gun issue is easy access to guns and white nationalism. Those are the top 2 things. Republicans, meanwhile, say it's mental illness and parenting issues. So there isn't very much common ground in terms of where the parties feel the core of the problem is.
And according to our poll, more than 40% expect no action from Congress. In Washington, Doug Lusader, Fox News.
Apologies that we were missing some of the underlying tracks there, so you couldn't hear some of the comments from the guests in that package, but House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said we must pass gun violence prevention legislation. Congressman McCarthy said we have laws today that aren't enforced. The number of people who try to buy a weapon who are not legally have the right to do it, less than 8% of those who are even prosecuted today. Again, that was House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. And the last person shown in that package was Tom Bevan. He's from Real Clear Politics. He was speaking on Special Report on Fox News Channel. And he said, Democrats say the problem behind the gun issue is easy access to guns and white nationalism. Those are the top two things. Republicans, meanwhile, say it's mental illness and parenting issues. So there isn't very much common ground in terms of where the parties feel the core of the problem is. Thank you very much to Fox's Doug Luzader for that report. I can tell you that after earlier this morning, President Trump weighed in on the situation. There were reports yesterday he was minding, he had been informed of the situation, was monitoring it for updates. This morning the president tweeted, and we'll show you some footage of the police response there. The Philadelphia shooter should never have been allowed to be on the streets. He had a long and very dangerous criminal record. Looked like he was having a good time after his capture and after wounding so many police. Long sentence, must get much tougher on street crime. So those again were the president's sentiments after the shooting this morning. Yesterday's shooting, and the suspect surrendered this morning. Former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, Democratic candidate for president, had something to say this morning as well. He was holding a campaign event in I believe this was in Iowa. Let me double check that while I'm saying it out loud. Excuse me, he was speaking in his hometown of El Paso, Texas. Of course, I believe he was there yesterday for the vigil that occurred after the mass shooting that occurred in that community. Let's listen to some of his remarks from that event earlier this morning. Again, this is former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, the one of the candidates for Democratic president nominee. Democratic presidential candidate seeking his party's nomination. Here were his comments earlier this morning from El Paso, Texas.
By another human being, to see you in that room, and for your sisters to be there as well, and the strength and grace to greet me, a complete stranger in her life, and to make sure that I felt welcomed in her intensive care unit hospital room. To meet the nurses and the doctors and the frontline staff that were going to make sure that she was going to make it. And I wondered to myself, where in the world does she get that strength and that courage? Well, the next day at Del Sol Hospital, I found the answer. It was her mother, who was in her early 80s, who was also shot in the stomach. And though she was shot, in the aftermath of that shooting, she tended to other victims in the parking lot and inside of the store. Before she ever thought about the wounds that she was walking with that ultimately forced her to have to sit down and then lay down and then be taken into a hospital where again her life was saved by extraordinary El Pasoans from this community, one of whom, when she was on her way into her shift, a doctor in this community stopped me and she said, "Hey, Beto, I love the way this community is coming together right now. And I just want you to know that I'm going into my shift right now. I'm a doctor. We're going to keep saving these lives. But I also want you to know that I'm an immigrant. I'm not unlike so many people in this community, so many millions in America who by their very presence and their sacrifice and their service make this country great." This is a beautiful community. One of, if not the safest cities in the United States of America. Safe, not despite the fact that we are a city of immigrants. More than a quarter who live here came here, chose us, left their hometown, their family, their culture, their language far too often, to start anew here as strangers in a strange land, to do better for themselves and for their kids, but also to do better for us. And they have. And this connection that we have with Ciudad Juarez is one of the most beautiful that you will find between two cities from two countries anywhere in the world. 3 million with two histories, two nationalities, joined, not separated, by the Rio Grande River, forming something far greater and more powerful than the sum of their parts or the number of people involved. We went to one of the funerals in Ciudad Juarez. 8 Mexican nationals killed on that day here in our community. And again, the grace that those survivors and families showed in the face of such adversity and pain and suffering that I can only imagine. It made us sad as well, but it also inspired us with the strength and the courage that they showed. We owe this community time to heal. We owe one another our very best as those families make it through the toughest days they've ever known, the toughest days we've ever known. But from what I've seen since August 3rd, this community, El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, is more than up to the task. There is an embarrassment of riches, of kindness and compassion and help and service in El Paso right now. You know that because you are part of that. But I think we also owe ourselves, this community, the families that have been affected, answers about why this happened here in El Paso. Answers about what it's going to take to ensure that it does not continue to happen in El Paso or in communities like ours or anywhere across the United States. I begin with the gun that was used in that act of terror and the number of guns that we have in this country right now. You may have read the news that the killer's mother, when she learned that he had ordered an AK-47 and had received it, called the police in Allen, Texas. What does my son, who is not enlisted in the military, who has no need for a weapon of war, no training in it, what does he need with this gun? Though she may not have known how to articulate the question, she was asking for help for herself, for her son, and really, by extension, for this country. I know from listening to the surgeons and the doctors who have treated these gunshot victims at Del Sol and UMC, some of whom also serve at William Beaumont Army Medical Center, have been trained in combat trauma care. The wounds that they are seeing are like the wounds that they saw in Afghanistan and Iraq. These weapons, like the AK-47, were designed to kill people as effectively, as efficiently, in as great a number as possible, and that's exactly what they're doing. When you listen to the doctors describe the internal injuries of these survivors, it is absolutely horrifying. But to this point, we have a Congress too craven to act, a democracy not up to the task, that favors those who can pay for access and influence and outcomes, the complicity and the silence of those who are in positions of public trust. And that's exactly what has happened here in this country. We have a racism in America that is as old as America itself. An intolerance towards those who do not look like, or pray like, or love like, or speak like the majority in this country. That's part of our story, and we absolutely need to tell it, to face it, to acknowledge it, if we are ever going to change it. But we have always tried, until now, to change that. Until this president, who so openly speaks in racist terms, who so openly favors one race, one religion, one kind of people in this country over every other kind of people in this country. Proposing to ban all Muslims, all people of one religion, one faith, from the shores of a country that is comprised of people from the world over, from every walk of life, from every tradition of faith. It's hard to imagine that it's happening in America, but it is happening in America. To tell people of color, born in this country, to go back to where they came from. To describe Klansmen and neo-Nazis and white supremacists and white nationalist terrorists as very fine people after they have marched and chanted, "Jews, you will not replace us." Someone in his maiden speech for the highest office in the land, the greatest position of power and public trust, who describes Mexican immigrants, though they commit crimes at a lower rate than those born in this country, as rapists and criminals, constantly warns through incessant repetition of invasions and infestations, and calls people human beings, and let's be clear, the most desperate and vulnerable human beings, fleeing the deadliest countries on the face of the planet, showing up here without a dime to their name, without any prospect of hope or advancement, except that they came here to this country of asylum seekers and refugees and immigrants, this country known by the Statue of Liberty. He calls them animals and predators and killers. And this May of this year in Florida, as he warns about this invasion, and he asks the question to the assembled masses, what are we going to do to stop these people? And someone yells out, shoot them. And the crowd roars their approval. In the face of that, the president signals his consent. He smiles, he laughs, he encourages more of it. Every single year for the last 3, hate crimes have been on the rise in this country. Those counties that hosted a Donald Trump rally saw hate crimes increase by more than 200%. I want to make clear to you, to us, to the country, that what he says and what he does not just offend our sensibilities or our understanding of the traditions of this great country. It changes who we are as a country. You do not get kids in cages until you've given people permission to put them in cages by calling them animals and seeking to dehumanize them. You don't lose the lives of 7 children in the custody and care of the wealthiest, the most powerful country on the face of the planet unless you have made it possible. And you do not get somebody driving 600 miles to come to this community, in his manifesto repeating the very words used by the President of the United States to justify this act of terror and hatred and violence and death. And yet in the face of this, our institutions have failed us. And in this democracy, none of us can take any comfort or feel in any way superior, because all of us are part of the institutions, whether it is our legislatures, our Congress, the press, social media, they're all comprised of all of us. But they have been impotent in the face of the gravest threat that we have ever known. One that we experienced firsthand here in El Paso a week ago Saturday. It's almost as if the bigger the lie, the more obvious the injustice, the more furious the pace of this bizarre behavior, the more incapable we are of seeing it and clearly naming it and acting against it. This attack on El Paso is an attack on America. It is an attack on our ideal of what America can be. An America that has not been for so many in this country, based on their race, their ethnicity, their country of national origin, their gender, their sexual orientation. As Langston Hughes said in his poem about an America that was not an America for everyone, it's the land that has never been yet, and yet must be. It is in this land, in this very community, after the election of this president, at LBJ Elementary, that a third grade student approached us and asked, why does the president not like me? It's in this country, in Houston, Texas, when I retold that story, that a family came to me and they said it resonates with us because we have a third grader in our home. She's not Mexican American, she's Muslim. And she wonders if there's some other country we're supposed to go back to. Though she was born here, though she's a U.S. citizen here, though she's just as American as anyone else. When we allow this country to be defined along lines of race and ethnicity and religion, we allow a commander-in-chief to not only welcome that, but the violence that follows, to defy our laws, our institutions, and any ethical or moral boundaries. The end of that road is the end of this idea of America, the end of an America where every single one of us could belong and have a future. I'm confident that if at this moment we do not wake up to this threat, then we as a country will die in our sleep. The response to this has to be that each of us make a commitment to see clearly, to speak honestly, and to act decisively in this moment of truth. I, for one, see more clearly than ever that in a country that has 320 million people, but 390 million firearms, that we have too many guns, too many people who own them and use them and threaten us with them right now for the good of this country, for the good of the 40,000 of our fellow Americans, our fellow human beings who will lose their lives to gun violence this year and every year going forward until we change course. And I see more clearly than I ever have that not only do we need universal background checks, not only do we need red flag laws that would stop somebody when they pose a danger to themselves or someone else, not only do we need to end the sale of assault weapons and weapons of war that were designed for the battlefield and have no place in our communities, but we must, as a country, buy those weapons, take them off the streets altogether. There are millions of them today, and their ability to inspire terror, to make our kids and your kids afraid to walk into that classroom at Mesita or El Paso High, because we know as a country we've accepted the murder of 6- and 7-year-old children where they sat at school. We've accepted high school students being hunted down in the halls of these institutions like El Paso High right behind me. It is time for us to be bold, to stand together, to stand up against those interests who would prevent us from saving the lives of our fellow Americans. It is more clear to me now than it has ever been before that when we do not make progress on the human dignity of our fellow Americans, the ability to work a job, and just one job, not 2 or 3 because you're paid a living wage, to be able to depend on health care as something that's a right that you don't have to worry about so that you're well enough to live to your full potential, to know that your community, that you and your family count. Not only is it the right thing to do to make sure that this country is realizing its full potential and promise for every single one of us, when we fail to do that, we provide fertile ground for the kinds of demagogues that we have in office right now, who will use your fear and your frustration against you, against us, against one another. Demonize immigrants and minorities. Blame them for the problems that you have. I see more clearly now than I ever have before that immigrants in this community, in this state, in this country will continue to be attacked, not just killed as they were at the Walmart, but terrorized as we just saw last week in Mississippi. 600 people who came to this country for the privilege of working the toughest, shittiest jobs that no one else here would allow their children to work, in chicken processing plants, in picking cotton and working in the gin, working 2 or 3 shifts, maybe making a minimum wage if they're lucky. Far too often their immigration status used as leverage against them to pay them something far less or nothing at all. This has in part caused this kind of treatment of the people who make America great, who are part of who we are, who are the very fabric of our lives. And the response to that is no more being defensive or being on the back foot or apologizing for who we are and who we want to be. It is using the example of El Paso, Texas, and showing that when we legalize those who are in this country, when we free dreamers from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens, when we elevate the asylum seeker, the refugee, that person who has no other hope or choice but to come here, not only is it good for them, it is great for the United States of America and fundamental to any success or strength or safety or security we could hope to have. And I see more clearly than I ever have before that if we do not tell our story, others will tell it for us. This proud community has to tell the world just who we are and what made us so special. And to remind ourselves that though we have something absolutely extraordinary here in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, though we are separated by hundreds of miles from the other centers of power and population, as Martin Luther King reminded us, we are all caught in this inextricable, inescapable network of mutuality. We're tied in a single garment of destiny. Sooner or later, the challenges, the problems of this country will come find you, as they came and found us on August 3rd. So telling the full and real and true story of this country, just who made us great in the first place, on whose backs America was built, and whose descendants could profit from it, and whose descendants were virtually locked out from it.
You've been watching remarks from former Congressman Beto O'Rourke. He is a candidate for president from the Democratic Party. More than 20 candidates, I believe, still in that race. He has been talking about President Trump, also saying that he supports a buyback of assault weapons and weapons of war in this country. Says the owners paid a fair price for what they own. Also talking about he's going to be shifting his campaign focus away from Iowa and New Hampshire, going to places like Mississippi, Arkansas, Oklahoma, to demonstrate when we say that everyone counts, we really mean that everyone counts. So promising to take his campaign elsewhere outside of the traditional early primary and election locations. Of course, we mentioned earlier that President Trump weighed in on the shooting in Philadelphia. So politicians, we brought you some reporting from Doug Luzader in Washington, D.C. about some reaction from other candidates. The president's comments were that the Philadelphia shooter should never have been allowed to be on the streets. He had a long and very dangerous criminal record. Looked like he was having a good time after his capture and after wounding so many police. Long sentence must get much tougher on street crime. Mayor Jim Kenney, speaking last night, just before the suspect's capture, said of police, these officers need help. They need help. They need help with gun control. They need help with keeping these weapons out of these people's hands. He also said he was thankful that officers' injuries weren't life-threatening. I told you earlier the two little boys, if the officer had his head grazed just a little bit more, the two little boys would grow up without their dad because this government at the federal and state level don't want to do anything about keeping these guns off the street and out of the hands of criminals. Even Police Commissioner Richard Roth said it's nothing short of a miracle that we don't have multiple officers killed today. Here, in fact, are some of Commissioner Ross's remarks from earlier this morning.
And I am surprised that it came out because he was indicating to some that he wasn't going to do that he was not going back. And many of you have found out, about his history. Very significant. In fact, he told me on the phone he used the word extensive. He had an extensive criminal history, and that he knew the system, and this is why he was making the outlandish demands that he was making. But we weren't going to lie to him and tell him that we were going to acquiesce in what he wanted, because that's not what you do either, because that creates problems as well.
Are you?
Again, that was Philadelphia Police Commissioner Richard Ross speaking this morning with the media. Here again is video of the suspect's surrender last night.
Abby, okay, so looks like they're coming out.
They got him. They got him.
Huh? They got him. Okay.
And I mentioned earlier this morning that that Maurice Hill, the suspect's attorney, Shaka Johnson, who is a frequent guest on Good Day Philadelphia as a legal expert, joined us this morning to talk more about the case. Here is an interview he did with us on Good Day Philadelphia, and his conversation with anchors Mike Jarek and Alex Holly.
Heat wave. You know the story by now. 6 officers shot, police officers shot in Philadelphia. And we're learning a lot more with some inside information about this suspect.
So we know so far that his name is Maurice Hill. Here's his previous mugshot. This is not a new mugshot, and he's had a history with run-ins with police. He's been, about how many arrests? Oh,
he's been arrested over a dozen times since he was 18. He's 36 now.
With the latest arrest happening about 3 years ago. But his attorney, Shaka Johnson, was very involved with negotiations. Commissioner Ross talked about him during the 6 o'clock press conference. It was the latest press conference we've had about this incident this morning. Here it is.
I give his attorney, Shaka Johnson, a lot of credit that he came, and he was able to certainly engage him in conversation much longer. There was a point when we were on a 3-way conversation. But that was towards the end of the night when, after a while, he just decided to talk a little more. I guess we had started to wear on him a little bit.
Wore him down, then coaxed him out with some tear gas, too. But Shaka is here at the desk with us now. Thanks for coming in. How long have you known this Maurice Hill?
Over 5 years, somewhere between 5 and 7 years.
And so you've worked on other cases with him?
I have.
And give me an example of what he was arrested for.
Drug cases.
Gun charges or no?
There may have been a weapons offense in there.
Yeah.
Certainly not employing it in this manner, but a weapons offense.
So you're at home, right?
Yes.
As an attorney doing some work. And you know what's going on in North Philly, right?
Yes.
You've heard the reports.
Correct.
You don't know that it's your client
Absolutely not.
in the house?
Absolutely not.
How do you find out it's your client?
He calls my phone at about 8:30.
And
directly.
what does he?
Unc, I need some help. Unc, as in a term of endearment.
Right.
Unc, I need some help.
Because you guys have worked together. So
Because we work together. And since he hasn't had needed my professional services in the last 3 years, we really just communicate to check on one another. You know, how are you doing? So when he called, I instantly knew what he meant. The feeling was I knew what he meant. And so the conversation immediately turned to how do we get you out of there safely? Because he was saying they're going to kill me. They're going to kill me.
Was that his main concern?
Yes, it was. That was one of his main concerns. Obviously, over the next few hours, the concerns seemed to shift, you know, to other direction. I have children. What about my kids? You know, they shifted over time.
How many kids does he have?
I know of 2. I know his teenage son, and I know that he has a newborn daughter who is now, I think, 3 days old.
And a girlfriend that he was FaceTiming with.
Correct.
Because police mentioned that he wanted to speak with him, and he was very concerned about his new daughter.
That's correct. Those are some of the, for lack of a more artful term, the demands that the police are talking about he made. But perhaps to a person in his position, they seem pretty reasonable, considering what his next few years will look like.
Okay, so you're at your home.
Right.
How do you get up to the scene? Does the commissioner ask you to come up?
No.
Negotiators?
No, they don't, because as you might know, the police they feel like they have this under control, which is understandable. I'm sort of working on it from a different angle because I have a different relationship with this young man.
And you're also a former police officer.
I'm a former police officer. I was on SWAT. And so I know that this is not going to go in perpetuity. This is not going to last long.
No.
So at some point, Commissioner Ross did tell me I'm going to give you till 11:45 to see if you can, what you've been doing for the past few hours.
The commissioner, this is highly unusual to have a person's attorney
Correct.
part of the negotiation.
And
Absolutely.
this has already been going on for several hours because it started around 4:30.
And they've been talking to hostage negotiators. The commissioner himself was out front of the property.
That's right.
So when I got involved, they were already 4 hours in. And so there were another 3 hours. And the commissioner finally told me, listen, Shaka, I'll give you till 11:45 to see if you can get him out.
And what time was this when he told you that?
11:15.
Oh, so you only had 30 minutes.
Correct.
And then, it worked.
But we had been working over the course of time.
Right. The officer said, but the officer had done, Commissioner Ross, a press conference saying we tried to reach him. He's picking up the phone, but he's not responding to us.
Correct.
So when you got on the scene and talked to him, was that the first time he actually engaged and started responding and talking?
No. He was talking from the time he called me. He stayed on the phone. We had 3-way conversations between the district attorney, myself, and Mr. Hill. We had a 4-way conversation with the district attorney, myself, Commissioner Ross, and Mr. Hill.
Maybe you can't do this. Can you tell us what the conversation was? What is the thing that you said that made that scene happen, him come out?
Well, you got to remember, you have a stew of people on the phone. You have his attorney, who I have a different affection for this young man.
Right.
You have the district attorney, who's a politician, and then you have the chief law enforcement officer and Commissioner Ross, all on the same phone. So there are 4 different agendas, when you include Mr. Hill, 4 different agendas on the line at the same time.
Right.
So everyone kept trying to direct the conversation their way, which is understandable. But the consensus was, you have to come out.
Right.
That was the point.
But they're going to kill me, is what he's saying.
But I want to make sure that, you're going to kill me.
Why in the hell? He had a handgun on him when he came out.
Yeah, well, listen. Let me say this to you, Mike.
Well, I know what you're going to say, but come on.
Where you want me to go? Because the fact of the matter is this. I don't think it's ever been done, and I'm going to say this unabashedly. Mr. Hill and I talked about this. They don't typically, in scenarios like this, take black defendants into custody.
I know
all
what
right?
you're saying.
And this is what he and I talked about on the phone. I said, so my man, this is looking pretty grave for you, all right? The world is watching, and that may be one of the things giving the police some pause, because the world is watching. Use this time wisely, and at least,
What, was he prepared to use the gun?
No, not at all.
It was in his
So
pants?
it just happened to be on him? Or?
I don't know anything about any guns.
Okay.
What I do know is I told that young man that he needs to come out, and we have a deadline. We have a hard, fast deadline of 11:45. It was extended by a few minutes.
By a few minutes.
By a few minutes for logistic reasons. And then he did exactly what he said.
So when you saw him come out, when was that? Because have you spoken to him since? What did
Yes.
he say?
Commissioner Ross is a man of his word. What he did was, I asked him, if he comes out, I need you to allow me a few moments with him here on the scene. Once he's in police custody, I don't want you to whisk him away and me talk to him in 10 days. And he did exactly that. He positioned him in the van. He allowed me to go into the van and have a one-on-one with Maurice there in the van.
And what was that conversation like?
Well, I'll tell you this. I felt like what he needed at that moment, he needed a hug. I gave him a hug. You know, all the sweat and his blood from being drug on the ground, put it on my suit. I gave him a hug, and I said, you know, we got a hard road to toe. Well, I'll see you in a couple of days at the jail, and we'll go forward from here. It didn't make sense to try to have an attorney-client meeting in that
Plus,
moment.
you don't know the official charges
And we've
yet.
been talking for the last 4 hours.
Right.
So,
well, there's a lot of police officers who don't want to give this man a hug. He can close to killing 6 people.
You know what, though? At some point, you know, I'm not a humanitarian, or, you know, anything, but, and nor have I ever been in this scenario before, you know, even when I was a police officer. But I don't think anybody's been in this scenario before, even officers who have been in shootouts in their career.
I heard that many times yesterday.
Yeah, to have somebody with an AK-47 shooting at you.
But at the same time, too, people are going to have questions about how he had so many offenses and how he's still able to get guns and how that happened.
Which is a segue to a much larger conversation about how a person is able to acquire that many guns,
and
that
how
many
are they able
rounds.
to get back on the street, though, after multiple offenses and still be able to get into a situation like this?
What a night.
Right.
Good to see you, man.
And it's
Pleasure
not
seeing
over.
you guys. Pleasure seeing you
over.
guys.
Thank you, Shaka.
We're welcome.
We'll take a break.
Thank you to attorney Shaka Johnson for joining us on Good Day this morning to talk about that. Again, we mentioned that the suspect, Maurice Hill, 34 years old, is now out of the hospital. Here is a video of him being released from the hospital and remaining in police custody and being taken to Philadelphia Police Headquarters. I don't believe there are official charges for him yet, but I think we'll have more coverage on the Fox News at 5, 6, 10, and 11. Close out here with dispatch call that came in.
We got several shots, officers. We got an officer down. They're still getting shot. Shots fired. I need long gun SWAT. 3715 North 15th. Assist the officer, please by radio. We have an officer shot, and they're still being shot at.
They're saying the shooter's in the kitchen. We got an officer down. Radio, I want Erie Avenue shut down right now.
Again, what a crazy day yesterday in North Philadelphia. Appreciate the efforts of Philadelphia police to keep the community safe. Wish the officers who were wounded a quick recovery, as well as the officer hurt in the car crash. Thank you very much for joining us on Fox 29 News Now today. Again, watch Fox 29 News at 5, 6, 10, and 11 tonight for the latest updates on the story, including more on the shooting suspect, Maurice Hill, his criminal background, more than 12 arrests, time spent in prison. We'll be digging into that. Have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll see you back here after Good Day Philadelphia tomorrow. Have a great Thursday.